That's what you're here to find out, obviously, on First Pitch. And we're going to be talking St. Louis, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Washington, D-backs, Cubs, White Sox, Royals, Astros, Mariners, Orioles, Rangers. All those games and more coming your way here, and joining me to break them down, it's the team that we headed into the All-Star break with. They did such a good job, we brought them right on back. Bryan, Leonard, and Adam Trigger breaking down the slate for you here today. I'm your host, Dan Alexander, and we are excited to be back. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching live or on the rewatch, hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss when we're going live here or posting content on WagerTalk TV. We know B. Leonard's cat's pumped up for the return of baseball. Bryan's talked about it before. Absolutely loves baseball, curling up, handicapping. That's how Bryan picks so many winners. His cat's got the direct line to how to bet these games. Bryan, let's start off here with St. Louis and Atlanta. It looks like we got Sonny Gray and Spencer Schwellenbach is going to be the opposing pitcher here. Total in this one, we're looking at some 7.5s out there, some plus money that you can even get looking towards the under. You think runs coming out of the All-Star break might be at a premium in this matchup? What are you thinking, Bryan?
I think in this one, I really do. I was hoping to get a little bit better on the line to play the under here, but the line's fair, and I like it. Sonny Gray, best pitcher on the St. Louis staff. He's had some up and downs as of late. I like veteran pitchers and veteran teams, actually, coming out of the break to concentrate on what they're doing and work on that. And Sonny Gray obviously has something to work on because he did struggle a little bit down the stretch. But he's by far their best pitcher, and I think he comes out really strong here. I took a look at these teams on the season in WRC Plus. They're both below average. There's the bottom half of the league in hitting. And if you take a look, a lot of the guys that I follow do really intense work on the stats for Major League Baseball. They come out with a lot of good stuff over the week because of the All-Star break. And they talked about isolated power. And these two teams struggle in that regard, especially Atlanta. I remember just a couple of years ago, Atlanta was up there with the Yankees, with the Dodgers in WRC Plus this year, as I mentioned, below 50% for the league. And if you take a look at the power part of that, there is none. Marcell Ozuna's having a terrific season. Riley's starting to hit a little bit better as of late, but Olson's having a terrible year after that terrific season he had last year. And obviously, when you're missing what was the number one fantasy draft pick in the outfield in Acuna, Acuna has been gone pretty much the entire season. Sean Murphy, who was really good as a catcher last year, hitting-wise, he hasn't had a good season. Neither has Adam Duvall and some of these outfielders. So not buying into the Atlanta offense at all here, but I do like Spencer Schwellenbach. You take a look at his numbers. He only walks 5.3% of his batters. Strikeout rate's a little bit lower at 21.9, but hey, for a young guy who's only made a few starts in the majors, that's the least of my worries. But he keeps the opposition off balance. Exit velocity is excellent, 87.5. Hard hit percentage and his expected WOBA are great. I think we've got two pitchers that are far better than what the hitters are in this game. I like the under here. And although Atlanta's a place, I've been there before, the ball does travel, I think we can get an under here, and the line's very fair in this one.
Yeah, and even I'm seeing some 8s pop in at some spots as well. So if you do like that 7.5, hey, you can get plus money on it. Or if you want a little bit of that half-run insurance, check that under out, sitting over at 8. That's Bryan Leonard. WT.buzz/BL is where you can find him at. Trig, you'll be happy to know, I'm sure you can tell, I'm on the road here, so I do not have the bell. So I'm sure you're happy to know that. But rest assured, Joe Ranieri behind the scenes, he will not let a stone go unturned. So I just want to warn you, Trig, there may be some ringing in your future. But man, all joking aside, let's talk some D-backs and Cubs here. This one is an early game, so I'm glad we're starting with it here at the top. Looks like a 2:20 start is what I'm seeing here on my screen. And I know in this game, you're hoping the Cubs have a strong post-All-Star push because you have some future tickets that you're holding with that ball club. But as far as this game goes, how do you see it shaking out, and what do you think is maybe an angle that folks could bet in this one?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the side is concerned, I think both of these teams are extremely underrated. Especially the Diamondbacks.
Fair.
If I had, if I had to throw a side lean out, which I don't have a strong opinion on the side, I would just, take a shot with the plus money because I actually think Arizona is probably the most undervalued team relative to what their expected record should be in the league. They're 49-48. Their expected record is better than that. And I think they're better than that. So Arizona is probably the most undervalued team right now of the good teams, right? Like you can make a case that some of the, the bottom teams are way undervalued against what the market says they are. But like, I think Arizona is a really good team that's priced like a 500 something team. So I don't want to fade them here. I don't want to lay minus 140, minus 145 and play against them. But I do feel like the Cubs, could have a good second half. They kind of saved their season, Dan, winning 6 of 8 heading into the All-Star break. I think that they were kind of left for dead before that stretch. Sweep the Orioles, which was just massive for them to sort of get back in it. This is a team that just hadn't hit at all with runners in scoring position. They finally started to get some of those hits, some of those timely hits, put up some crooked numbers, which is, kind of where I'm going here. In terms of, looking at a total that I think is quite low at 7.5. Now, Arizona's offense has been rolling, and I don't think that's a fluke. This team, Dan, has put up double digits 10 times already this season. That's as many times as they scored 10 or more last season, and they've done it with guys like Corbin Carroll, Eugenio Suarez, like not having great first halves. And now both of those, I bring those two guys up specifically because they're both starting to heat up. You have Carroll prior to the All-Star break. He's improved his OPS in every month so far this season, from an ice-cold April, a little bit better in May, a little bit better in June. So far in July, he's got a chance to have an 800 OPS, which is kind of what I expected him to be as a player when he came into the league. And of course, if you guys remember back to the beginning of last season, I mean, it looked like he was going to set the league on fire those first couple months. And then he kind of, the league figured him out and he had to figure out how to adjust. And then Eugenio Suarez is just a veteran that you expect a lot more than like hitting, a $190, which is where he was at up until a couple weeks ago. He had a huge week last week. And so, you throw two guys that have been struggling in with guys like Ketel Marte, who's, in my opinion, I have him as like a top 10 player in the league, and some of the other guys in this lineup. And that's an offense that can do some real damage, even against a guy like Justin Steele, whose numbers speak for themselves. So, I'm not going to sit here and break down Steele's numbers. I mean, below 3 ERA, below 1 WHIP. He's clearly one of the elite starting pitchers in the league, but Arizona hits left-handed pitching extremely well. And so at the very least, I think that they can have good enough at-bats here, Dan, where Steele's not going 7-8 innings. And I think that if they can get him out in the 5th or the 6th, probably the 6th since Steele tends to pitch deep, you're going to get cracks at a Cubs bullpen, which is still plug and pray, in my opinion. There's still Counsell's still figuring out what he wants to do with the pen. It's worked more than it's not worked recently, but we've seen stretches where they just cannot get it right at the end of games. And so that would be where I could see Arizona sort of doing their damage. Now, the Cubs, like I said, they're hitting more. Ryan Nelson is a guy that I personally like, and I think that he is more that like what we've seen from him the past 3 starts, but he still can get he can blow up. We saw it against the Twins. We've seen it at a couple of different scenarios this year. He does give up contact, and like I said, the Cubs were just due to knock a few in with runners in scoring position. So, the D-backs bullpen has some really good options, but Seawold's looked a little shaky of late. This total is 7.5. I would be surprised if both of these teams don't get to 3. And so you start to do the math there. If you can get 3-3, then you're guaranteed 4-3, right? And I just wouldn't be that surprised to see a crooked number or two, or to just see something like the Diamondbacks blow this open at some point because of the way that they've hit the ball of late. So 7.5 felt low. I typically don't have strong opinions on totals, but this would be one of the, I'd be willing to play against the market here and take the over 7.5.
So we got one under 7.5 out of our man Bryan Leonard. We got an over from Trig here. Trig, a quick follow-up from you. We got Richard Lockhart in the chat. He was talking about Cubs money line in this one, and he was also taking a look at some pitcher props. You mentioned Steele potentially going a little deep. Could him going deep potentially be correlated with over on his strikeouts? Again, if you're playing in over in a game, you think maybe the pitchers can get got in this one, obviously. But 4.5 is the number that our man Richie L is seeing. And shout out to the chat. If you're joining us live, make sure you hit that like button. Hop below in the comments. Let us know what totals you're eyeing this evening. And don't worry, we got some money line plays, some run line plays coming your way. But any thoughts there on Steele's K's before we roll on here to another game?
Yeah, I would play anything Steele related under, because I want to rephrase something. I think he will battle here potentially to get to 6th innings, but I don't think he's going to go as deep as the market suggests he will, right? Like, we've seen some Steele starts lately that he's gone. He had a complete game, a few weeks ago. I think his last one, maybe he went 7. So he's had some really good starts mixed in there where he's just been totally lights out. The point I was trying to make is, even if Arizona can't blow him up, I think they have competitive enough at bats against him where he's out in like the 6th or out a little bit earlier than we've seen him. And that gives us maybe 3 innings to go at the Cubs bullpen, which has been very shaky at best. Both of these teams rate out in the bottom third of the league in bullpen, just metrics across the board. So you're probably got some runs late here. If you don't get them early, you're probably getting them late, is the way I see this one.
Yeah, that's Adam Trigger, WT.buzz/AT. You can check both of these guys out at WagerTalk.com. We'll talk some deals that we got going over there a little bit later, but let's keep on rolling. And Bri, want to get your thoughts here. Astros and Mariners. Richard, who we just answered that question for, was saying this was an under that he was eyeing. Hunter Brown, Louis Castillo. Lowest total of the day is what I'm seeing on the WagerTalk Live odds screen. Looks like a 7 in this one. This is obviously the nightcap here, so hey, maybe some sleepy bats here for the final game of the evening. Is that how you see this one shaking out, or did not really much jump off the page for you, Astros and M's? We got you muted here, Bryan. I think the cat attacked you.
Okay, sorry about that.
There we go.
Trig made a great point when he talked about the bullpens. Mm-hmm. The bullpens are all ready. Normally, you've got to take a look at who pitched yesterday, who's pitched throughout the last 3 days.
So true.
That kind of thing. And so now every team has got the full bullpen. And while I'll agree on, the Arizona, the bullpen hasn't been that great, they've got everybody in the correct positions going into it, which is not the position you're in during the normal run. You rarely have your 7th inning guy, 8th inning guy, 9th inning guy all set.
So true.
Use. So, which is another reason why I prefer the unders a little bit on today's card, along with the bats that haven't been used. So, when I take a look at this one with the Houston game, I prefer the Houston side. I could see the under as well.
Okay.
But I've talked in the past about Seattle's this being a bad place for hitters. I even looked into it a little bit more during the break, and yeah, it's pretty bad. When you take a look at teams when they play at home and on the road, Seattle team is far better hitting on the road, and that tells you that teams should struggle here, which is one of the reasons why Seattle's starting pitching staff is considered, if not the best, one of the best in Major League Baseball. Now we're seeing why, is because they're pitching in this place that doesn't give up many runs. Hunter Brown, other than one start in the last 2 months, he has been fantastic. And him pitching against a Seattle team who strikes out more than anybody in baseball, them along with the Minnesota Twins are two teams you want to pitch against when it comes to strikeouts. I think Hunter Brown's going to have a big day here. I don't do the props. I don't know what his strikeout numbers are. That would be something that I would take a look at. If you do play those props, take a look at Hunter Brown here against this Seattle offense. Brown's been terrific, and to catch him here, that's a slight underdog with the better team in Houston. I prefer that side. The situation for Seattle is right now, I'm just looking to fade them as much as I possibly can. They're not playing well, and this is a pretty good spot here for the Astros, and I'll take them.
Going to talk O's Rangers coming up here next, but Trig, you have any other thoughts there? Tie a little bow on Astros and Mariners before we get rolling to the Corbin Burns show. How do you see that one shaking out?
No, I don't have a huge opinion here. It's just this was one I kind of quickly skipped off because, and the reason I don't is I still think the Mariners have elite pitching, and very well could win that division with the pitching that they have. I just don't trust the bats at all, and the Astros sort of started to get themselves back in the mix prior to the break. So it's just a tough one for me here because I could make a case for both. So not much on this one.
All right, well, then let's swing it to O's and Rangers. Corbin Burns, Eovaldi, and man, talk about teams who limped into the All-Star break. That was the case for this Orioles team, man. I mean, that was not too kind for them. Sure, they end it with a win. You kind of waved the white flag. Finally, we got a win against the Yankees. Before that, Trig, it was 5 straight losses. And it wasn't only just, we're scraping along. They were leaving all kinds of runners stranded. So do you think we might be seeing a potential regression or positive regression, I guess, in the case to the mean for this Orioles side? Because it wasn't like they weren't making contact. They just weren't getting those runs across. So you think maybe some time away resetting for this O's team who was rolling before that little stretch could be a huge boost for the bats. How do you see this one kind of playing out here? Because both of these teams are maybe hoping, especially in the case of the Rangers, they can finally catch fire here coming out of the break.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about this one on Wager Talk today, so I'll go in more detail there. But quickly, yes, I think the Orioles are, you're going to see some short-term value on them, in my opinion. They lost 5. Just to put it into context, they lost 5 of 6 to finish the first half. They're still 20 games over 500. This is a team that managed to avoid any sort of real adversity for 2 years in the regular season. They've basically overachieved for 2.5 years up until 2 weeks ago when they finally slumped and lost. Had an extended losing streak. So it's been insane to watch the Orioles this year with expectations play as well as they have. And I think that, that was nothing more than a road trip to Seattle. They went Seattle, Oakland on a road trip, and then they had to come home, play the Cubs in a do or die series, and then play the Yankees, who came off of playing poorly against the Rays. So that was just it's kind of a perfect storm of tough spot after tough spot for the Orioles. So yeah, I like them here. You rarely get Corbin Burns at minus 125. He is up against what would be considered an elite option in Eovaldi. But the one thing I like, I've talked about this on First Pitch a couple of times with the Orioles, is they struggle with velocity, right? If you look at their offensive numbers, they're near the bottom of the league in hitting velo, which is anything 95 and up. And so you look at Eovaldi, he sits about 96 on his four-seamer, but all of his other pitches are, he throws 5 pitches, and those are kind of his out pitches, right? Where he relies on that curveball or, being able to take a little bit off the fastball to get outs. And I actually think that that's going to work to his detriment here. I think the Orioles are going to be prepared for some of the off-speed stuff, maybe the curveball in particular, since everyone on this Orioles team seems to hit curveballs 450. It's just, if you watch this team play, you hang a curveball, it's hit off the warehouse out in right field typically with them. So I actually like this matchup for the Orioles. I think you're getting a great price on Burns, and this is definitely one of the better things I see on the board today.
Nice breakdown there from Adam Trigger. Again, he'll give a little bit more in-depth thoughts there coming up on Wager Talk today. That's right, folks. Coming your way, we got Gianni the Greek, Adam Trigger, Art DeCesar joining Teddy Covers and the Prez coming up here on Wager Talk today. So don't go anywhere once we're done and we shut it down here for the day, heading on into the weekend. Still got live content coming your way alongside some single game breakdowns. If there's a game that we didn't touch upon here, you can probably find it still at Wager Talk TV for tonight's loaded MLB slate. Bryan, before we get into best bets, we're going to be talking Cincinnati, Washington, and White Sox and Royals. And longtime listeners might know what we're betting in White Sox and Royals with my man Adam Trigger here on the dais. But before that, a game that keeps coming up here in the chat is this Mets game. Excuse me. Miami sending up Cabrera. We got the lefty Manaea for the New York Mets. We're looking at 8, pretty much painted across the board here. Road favorite Friday is kind of the theme here. Often on Fridays, even following the All-Star break here. Anything stand out to you in this Mets and Miami matchup? Because again, that 8 painted. Maybe Mets bats can continue rolling a little bit. What are you thinking?
I do like the way the Mets are playing. Can't argue with that at all. So you
almost wish that the break didn't happen because it almost stops. How you can bet on them.
That is a great point. A lot of people like to play streaks. Well, keep in mind that the streaks have all ended. You can't take a week off and expect it to continue like that. So if you're playing streaks, you start all over again here. I prefer the Mets side here. I prefer the pitching for the Mets, but I can't get behind either one of these teams because of the line. It's a little bit higher than what I would make it here on the Mets. Cabrera's not a bad pitcher, but he gives up a 15.3% barrel rate, which is extremely high, and he walks a lot of batters, and you just cannot do both of those things. Now, granted, he plays in a great pitcher's park in Miami, so it may not affect him in this one, but it's not something I'm looking forward to do, is playing him in a hitter's park, which he's in this league. You go out in just as many hitter's parks as you do pitcher's parks. So I prefer the Mets side here. I think the starting pitching has been better in this regard, and I do prefer the starting pitcher in this one for the Mets, but can't get there with the line. The line's just not low enough. It's current. I'm looking at currently here for the Mets 129. If I get a 115, I'd play it. I think there's value there, but at this current number, I don't see any.
Yeah, and I mean, we are seeing some money kind of split on this one, so I don't think we're going to be seeing any minus 115s. I think, honestly, if anything, you're going to see this climbing higher for the Mets. Would you agree with that, Trig? Anything stand out to you in that one before we roll with some best bets?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I hope it climbs higher because I was hoping to get the Marlins in a situation where the +1.5 was cheap. Sometimes, so this game is in Miami, and sometimes you'll see that happen with, you'll get a discounted +1.5 on the home team, right? Like the books always juice up the +1.5 when it's the away team because like it's not rocket science at this point that you kind of get the extra at bat, and so that's usually priced in. Minus 150, way too expensive. I guess my reasoning, and this is one I'll probably talk about on WagerTalk today too. I was just trying to pick different games since I'm on both shows today. I do like Cabrera, like definitely more than, and that's what I'll go on into detail at WagerTalk today. Like I thought he was throwing the ball great in Jacksonville during his rehab, and he kind of came back up, had a really bad outing against the Reds, but it's like, I wonder how much of that, too, was just like last weekend before the All-Star, before the first half. It's been a long first half, probably like a 90-degree day out, if I remember correctly, in Cincy. And it was just like you could just tell the Marlins that whole weekend, you could just tell that they were not interested really in competing. So, even though the reason I guess I gravitate to the Marlins, Dan, is I still think that this team may come to play a little bit in the second half. I want to see a lineup here. That's another thing. I'll definitely want to see a lineup. They have some nice pieces at AAA that I think are going to start to intermix with the big league team since they're so far out of it. So I could see the Marlins being like a somewhat profitable team in the second half this year. You're always going to get value betting on them. Remember, this was a team that made the playoffs last year. As insane as it is to think that, they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but they could be a sneaky team in the second half. So I'll have my thoughts better organized for this one on Wager Talk today. But yeah, I think there's value with the Marlins. These teams tend to play each other tough. It's a divisional, matchup, and Cabrera I think has some upside. So Marlins is the lean.
Another little tease your way there coming up for Wager Talk today. As I said, Gianni the Greek going to be joining alongside Adam Trigger. So a terrific show heading on into Friday's MLB slate, which is a hefty one. But I know you're wondering, well, I got Bryan on here. I got Adam Trigger on here. What are these guys' best bets here tonight? You want the true ones? Head on over to wagertalk.com and wt.buzz/deals will find you a way to make some great savings while riding with these guys and getting yourself some winners. But as far as the free plays go, let's get into them. And Bryan, happy fade Patrick Corbin day. That's right. Patrick Corbin's on the bump right here post All-Star. That's pretty exciting as Cincinnati is visiting Washington. We talked about some of these road favorites here. So we're starting the latter half of the season with a 1-9 record here for Patrick Corbin. Frankie Montas is going to be on the bump. So I'm wondering for you, how are you looking to bet this one, Bri? Is it as simple as we're celebrating accordingly and we see Corbin on there and we're fading, or there's some other reasons that you think Cincinnati might be worth a look today?
Before I get to my breakdown, I do want to tell you I have 5 plays already up for today. I've got a 4% play, 28, 7, and 1, 80% on a 3% and higher. And right now, we've got some great specials going on right now. If you're looking for the entire day, or even if you're just looking for the 4% play, you're probably better off buying these packages out there. The long-term packages save a lot of money. Number one in Major League Baseball the last 30 days in net profit. Number one the last 60 days in net profit. Finished number 3 last year in net profit in Major League Baseball. So seeing things well, everything's going great. 5 plays today, including a big 4% play, 80% run on those big plays. I'm going to take a look at this game, as you mentioned. Rare chance to go against Patrick Corbin is in a favorable price here. In our opinion, he's the worst regular starter in Major League Baseball. His advanced stats prove that. His pitching run value is in the first percentile in the league. His fastball run value is in the first percentile as well. First percentile means the worst in the league. 100th percentile means the best in the league. He's a long way from that. He has a 5.57 ERA, 1.54 whip, but it's hard to believe, but his expected ERA is actually higher at 6.29 the last 3 seasons. His expected ERA has been 6.29 this year, 6.16 last year, 6.41 the year before, and yet he continues to get starts in Washington. Somebody's got some naked pitchers. That's all I got to say. But the Nationals have been hitting a slump offensively, as you mentioned. They're not hitting the ball well. This is a team I like the over in the season. Time to bring up these young guys. Get these veterans that stink out of there. They're just burning up innings. Time for them to think like a major league team and bring up some of these guys that got in the minors, because they got some good players down there. Frankie Montas slowly returning to previous levels after not pitching regularly since 2022. He had thrown 3 good starts, compiling 17 innings, only 5 earned runs, until getting hit pretty hard last time out in Colorado. But that's the altitude of Colorado. It's a different ballgame in Colorado than it is anywhere else, so that could be excused. The Reds are a better hitting team and have, in my opinion, a sizable pitching advantage here. And the line is very fair to go against Washington. Give me Cincinnati as my best bet on the show.
Cincinnati money line, says our man Bryan Leonard. Hop below in the comments. Let us know what your best bet is this evening or afternoon. We got a 2:20 start coming in MLB action. Trig, it was almost ceremonial. You know, we get you back on here post All-Star break. White Sox are playing the Royals, and folks probably know how we're looking to bet this one, riding with our man Adam Trigger. The Adam Trigger special, as it is known here. White Sox run line. Make the case for us, Trig.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you've watched this show, when we've talked about the White Sox, without a doubt, we've picked more winners than losers. I mean, like, it's kind of a running joke, but I've kind of nailed this team from an ATS perspective, if you will. It's almost always White Sox plus 1.5. The reason being, they're priced as a bottom team. They're one of the worst teams in the league. I've kind of said this with bad teams this year, and it's the reason that I probably won't have any action on the Marlins today. I really don't like backing bad teams unless I'm getting the plus 1.5. And this is a case where you do get it, plus 1.5 for the White Sox here is minus 115, minus 120. Dan, I did last call on Saturday, was going to go in detail about talking about Chris Flexen, and Kelly started ringing this obnoxious bell. I didn't get a chance to, so I'll do it here. He's the White Sox starter in this game. And the reason I want to talk about him is he's someone I've watched extensively since his time in KBO in 2020. I feel like from last year to this year, he's keeping the ball down, and thus he's keeping it in the ballpark. He's not giving up these fly balls that turn into home runs. Last year, I noted this on a couple of occasions. He had an atrocious fly ball to home run rate, far worse than like the majority, like league average. So what I mean by that is the number of home runs per fly balls he was giving up was like far and away the worst in the league. I think some of that has to do with randomness. I think some of that might have had to do with the fact that he played the second half of the year at Coors Field in Colorado after he got let go by the Mariners and picked up by the Rockies. But one of the things that I think has really benefited him this year is he's just been in the rotation right from the start. Last year in Seattle, he kind of didn't make the rotation out of spring, settled into the long relief role. Then guys like Robbie Ray and a couple other guys got hurt. Suddenly he was back starting games, struggled in that role and sort of never got going, if you will. And then the Mariners cut him and he ended up in Coors Field, which was just not a good situation for him. So he's been able to start every fifth day and he's really settled in nicely. 4 of his last 5 starts are quality starts. And the only one that wasn't, he went 5 2/3 and gave up 4 runs against the Dodgers. You could almost say that that's, just as good, if not better, as some of those other, 6-inning starts where he gave up 3 runs or less. And so I look at him going back to 2020, where he was dominant in Korea, one of the most dominant pitchers in the KBO that year. 2021 and 2022, almost identical numbers with the Mariners. 3.61 ERA, 1.25 whip in 21, 3.73 ERA, 1.33 whip in 22. And he didn't miss a start. He made 30 plus appearances in both of those seasons. So that's really consistent. Those are excellent numbers for a starter in Major League Baseball, which makes me look at last year as a fluke. I just think that he was in a tough situation last year, moving team to team and of course pitching at Coors Field. And so I just think that he's starting to look more like the Flexen that we saw from 2020 to 2022. And I think there's some value there. As far as the Royals are concerned, I love this team, in general. I think that they are, the lineup is very underrated with the fact that they have great exit velocity. Bobby Witt's one of the best players in the league at this point. But I still can't get behind Michael Wacha as a elite option, the way he's being priced here, minus 220 or whatever it is. He's totally turned it around the last 2 years, but if you've watched him lately, there's still a couple of starts where kind of labors through 5 innings. The Cardinals game and the Guardians game are the ones that stick out to me. Gave up 7 hits in both of those games. I just don't think he's the elite option. I'm willing to play against that. And then finally, this feels a lot like White Sox Twins. I think we talked about it on First Pitch last week. I actually had a 4%er in White Sox in the game 1 of the doubleheader against the Twins. I'm almost certain we talked about it on the show. The White Sox are 1-6 against the Royals this season, 2-5 against the plus 1.5. But 4 of those losses are 0-0 in the 7th. They ended up losing 3-0. White Sox leading 3-2 in the 7th, lost 5-3. A 2-0 loss in a game where I think Lugo fired an 8-inning gem. And a 2-1 lead in the 8th where they lost 4-2. I mean, for the White Sox to not have a better outcome against the plus 1.5 against the Royals when they're consistently taking leads into the 7th or 8th inning is just, I think, a little of, unlucky variance for them. So overall, these 7 games, I think, have been closer than what the record would suggest. And because of that, I think there's some value on the White Sox. You are getting the extra at bat in this situation. Royals are going to have to win it in 8 innings, essentially, by 2 or more runs. So White Sox plus 1.5, something I'm considering for today, and it'll be my best bet for the show.
Plus the 1.5 shocker there from Trig. But he backs it up with the reasoning why. Hop below in the comments. Let us know what your best bet is today. Trig giving you the White Sox as the free play here on the run line. And Bryan Leonard looking at Cincinnati against Washington. Money line. Like I said, hop below in the comments. Let us know what your best bet is. King the Boxer been dropping in his best bets, and he's looking at Dodgers. Says Dodgers 100% lock, money line, guaranteed, not missing. Well, I hope that you at least waited on that, because the thing opened at 140. As we've been on air here, we've seen that tick down at some of the sharper shops to all the way to minus 117. So the market disagreeing with our man King the Boxer. Best of luck, though, King, and let us know what your best bets are in the comments below. Shout out to Trig. Shout out to Bryan Leonard. Trig going to be joining you just about 25 minutes from now live on WagerTalk today. So don't go anywhere, folks. Stay tuned right here. On the way out, make sure you hit that like button. If you haven't already, subscribe. And if you hit that little bell, you're going to get notified anytime we go live here on WagerTalk TV. Best of luck to you this weekend. Happy MLB is back. We're going to be rolling on through the end of the season right here on First Pitch. And until then, folks, best of luck. And we'll see you Monday right back here on First Pitch.